I'm going to introduce Anita, and the purpose of today's session was all about how can we help groups to make the maximum impact in their communities. And one of the key things about that is communication. And Anita has been employed, contracted by Jeff from Goulburn Valley Community Energy for the Community Electrification Engagement Program with Sustainability Victoria. And her particular area is communications and social media. So we've asked her to come along today and just give a little 10-minute overview, I guess, of some of the things that she thinks are really important. So I'll hand over to Anita.
Hi, everybody. There's a few familiar faces in this meeting, so I apologise if I go over ground that you've heard before. So I have been engaged to help to assist with the grant funding members of the Hume CEN to increase or improve engagement predominantly via social media or digital channels within the community. And I am particularly working with 6 groups that Jeff has said are interested in this engagement. So the process I'm going through at the moment, I did provide a proposal which at a high level suggested spending about half the grant funding money on running social media advertising and the other half on creating content for the groups, and also in the process uplifting capability within the groups, which is variable across the groups. And it's a really challenging ask, because social media in particular takes up a lot of time and energy. It doesn't necessarily have to cost anything, but the process I'm going through right now is engaging with each of those 6 groups just to get a more detailed view of what the needs are for each. And then the plan is to come back to Jeff and the working group with a high level plan that outlines what can be done for each of the groups in the time frame to achieve the objective. So that's the process that I'm going through at the moment. And from what I've come across so far, from the discussions I've had so far, there's very much concern within the groups about ongoing capability once the funding runs out and my services are no longer available. What can the groups do by themselves? And also the creation of resources that will persist and can be used by the groups going forward. So that's something I'm helping with. But it's a very flexible engagement. So for example, with ACF Wodonga and Bree, I'm having a meeting tomorrow to talk about how they can market the event, predominantly via social media, but I'm sure the discussion will involve other things. So that's where it is at the moment. I'm very conscious of the time constraints. I'm very conscious that we're a few weeks into this project already, but I'm confident that we can actually carry out some activities that will be beneficial to all of the groups. It's just a matter of how the split will work. I mean, I'm discovering also that some groups are not set up to do Facebook advertising, for example. So, there'll be some flexibility in what is done for each group. Are there any questions or concerns?
Would anybody like to know perhaps, or say a particular area that you'd like some assistance with?
Coming from the Albury Wodonga group, I'm going to be one of the ones you'll be meeting up with on Saturday, Anita. And thank you, Jeff, for sort of linking us up with Anita. We're looking forward to it, because as I explained before I interrupted myself, but yeah, we are in need of sort of your sort of advice, especially in marketing and so on. So we're looking forward to catching up.
Yeah, thank you. Me too.
Yes, Jeff.
Anita, if I can just add to what you've said, in addition to the groups that you've been introduced to, there is an open invitation to all other groups within the Hume, and they're to contact me, and I'll set in train that process. But we started with the 8 that have been actively involved in the Electrify Hume project, but with the understanding there's still other groups that have an interest, and they need to express that interest to me.
There's a message in the chat from Helen. She says she has no microphone or camera that's working, and so she could do with a little bit of help with SUO, Sustainable Upper Ovens, could use a little bit of help in that regard. We might be able to assist with that too, possibly. I don't know if that's quite in Anita's brief.
Yeah, and look, I mean, I think the thing to point out is that I'm trying to strike a balance between being, doing what each group needs, as well as putting in place a couple of things that everybody can use. And I've had this discussion with Heather where, are there assets that I can create that sit in a repository or in Canva that everyone can use going forward as well. So we're trying to keep all of those things in mind so that everyone gets a benefit from it in the end of this project. So I'm open to suggestions as well. That's why I'm having these conversations with the groups. So it's really about us working together to determine what's required, not just me telling people what's required.
Maybe I'll ask a question here, not of Anita, but of everybody else here, for interest, because it will lead in nicely to some of the stuff I'm going to say. Everybody, can you put your hand up if your group has a mailing list and some way of automatically collecting those emails so you can send updates? So just put your hand up if you do. So we've got 5, I think. Yep. Okay. Put your hand up if you have a Facebook profile for the group. And keep it up if you post to it regularly. That's good. Those who've got one are doing some activities. That's fantastic. Does anybody have any other forms of communication besides email and Facebook? Yes, Derek?
And Instagram, WhatsApp, Messenger, and there's one other. I don't think we use TikTok, and we have a website, of course.
Fantastic.
And we send out newsletters probably monthly to our 600 or so
followers. For us, LinkedIn has been my main vehicle recently, and I noticed Karina have been quite active on LinkedIn, but it's a more professionalised energy conversation. But so it's not into your community, but it is a learning space for you.
I should have mentioned LinkedIn as well. We have a LinkedIn profile. If anyone would like to search for us, Windsor Caribbean Net Zero Emissions, WinZero.
Yeah, you're on top of it.
Sorry, Juliette, Zero Carbon has a website as well.
Oh, excellent. And that's the question I forgot to ask. Put your hand up if your group has a website or a web page, even if it's on somebody else's page. Okay, there's a few there. Excellent. Put your hand up if you're able to update that page whenever you want to. Oh, not too bad. But now leave your hand up if you do actually update it regularly.
Sometimes.
Regularly sometimes.
Okay, very good. Because those are the sorts of things that a lot of community groups, volunteer groups really struggle with. So I'll talk a bit about messaging in a minute. Are there any other questions for Anita and what she might be able to help you with? For instance, do you have any queries about the best social media channels or things like that? Or, yeah, I think mainly social media. Because you're the digital side of things, aren't you, Anita?
Yeah, predominantly for this project. And if I could just jump in and say a comment here, one of the things I think that's coming out of my discussions too is that there needs to be a tiny bit of work as part of this project in talking about what the objectives are and who the audiences are and those sort of fundamental communications things to drive the engagement and make sure people understand how to do that. And I mean, everyone I've spoken to, everyone is intelligent and passionate. So it's just a matter of having the tools to do those sorts of things to make sure that the effectiveness of the communication is as high as possible.
I've got a question here from Helen. She's asking what social media gets the attention of parents, and my quick answer to that would be go to where the parents are or go to where the kids are.
Yeah. I mean, it's the demographics are probably Instagram and Facebook. But the reality is these days you have to use multiple methods to reach any audience because it's the time of the week, it's the time of the day, it's the time of their life, it's the time, how old their kids are and what their kids are doing, sports clubs, social media. One of the things I've spoken to some of the groups about already is it's not just your channels that are important, but you can increase your reach by leveraging other people's channels as much as possible because if they are aligned in some way with what you're trying to do or the audiences you're trying to reach, then you should be talking to them about using their newsletters. Get into the school newsletter. Go to sponsor a school event if you've got any funding to do that, and get the opportunity to talk to parents. There's lots of ways to do it, not just social media, but there's not one way to hit your audience, unfortunately, which is why it's hard.
We've used school newsletters for various events, and schools are very receptive to that. There's only a very few schools that said, no, we don't take this sort of thing. Only 2 schools, and all longer. So, we've got quite a comprehensive list of schools there.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no reason if what you're talking about is a benefit to the audience, then why would they say no?
Yeah. And in that same area, your local community centres will often have a page, either a web page or a social media page, and local community Facebook pages. The Yak community page gets all sorts of stuff on it.
Yep. It just means that because it's because social media posts, they don't last. So you have to keep feeding the beast. You have to keep feeding the algorithm, which is why it's good to have a website and other channels as well. Otherwise, you just got to keep scheduling posts and doing it regularly and frequently, which is something I'm talking about separately to the groups. Sorry about the long answer, Helen. It's not a simple answer, unfortunately.
No,
Juliette, it's Terry. I can't figure it out. Put my hand up, but currently I'm involved with a review of the waterway strategy for the Golden Broken CMA, and it's out for comment now. But they're using a program at LOOMIO collaboration program, which is an interactive thing where you get invited into the comment, and you can comment on whatever. The way they've got it set up is in different themes, and then you can go in and people are put in, but you've got the ability to comment on any comment that's made. You don't have to tag on the end. It's it's an interesting process. I don't know whether that's applicable to what you're trying to do, but it might be worth just a bit of a look at that, actually.
Oh, absolutely. There's other applications similar to that, like Slack and C4CE Energy Together's own discourse platform that is designed exactly for that. But it really depends on how digitally savvy your members are and the people that you want to communicate with are. Making an impact with your group, and a big part of that is communication. And you need communication because basically to make an impact, you need a relationship with your audience, your target audience. And relationships only work when there's regularity and familiarity. And that means you have to communicate with them. So it would be a good analogy would be like if there's somebody that you see quite often, even if you don't know them really well, but you're constantly bumping into them and you have little conversations, and then you say, come along to the park at the end of the week, we're having a Christmas get together. The likelihood is that they'll come if they've got the time, obviously. But if it's somebody that you know, but you don't see very often, that same invitation won't land the same way. So communication is really important. Communication also gives you visibility. And also about making an impact is if you're communicating with someone, if you're only talking about what you're interested in, you're not going to keep them engaged. You need to meet people where they are, both physically. So, for example, when Helen asked about how do you engage parents, well, you go to the places that parents have to go to. And so that will be sporting events, community pages, community centres. But it also means psychologically. And that means having a good idea of the things that your community is concerned with, the challenges they have, but also the good things they have. And the final part of that is if you try to tell people what they should do, most people will resist that because most people like to think or want to be in control. So it's much better to demonstrate. And by demonstrate, I mean just do little projects here and there and do demonstrations at market stalls, that sort of thing. They're just conversation starters. They make people curious. And so that is a really good way of communicating. So communication's about relationships, and relationships depend on contact and familiarity. And the key components of that are regularity and consistency. Now, if you do a bit of searching online about social media, they'll say, oh, you should be posting about 2 or 3 times a week and responding to people all the time. Well, that's aimed at companies that are selling products. And it's aimed at this type of demographics that are like influencers, etc. In terms of community energy groups, the regularity is fine as long as you're consistent. So if you only want to post once every 3 to 4 weeks, that's fine, but keep doing it. If you can manage once every fortnight, that's excellent. So basically choose something that works for you and try to stick to it. And you need to target your content. So you've got to put stuff out there that is relevant to them. So if your community is mainly renters and not particularly good socioeconomic demographic, putting heaps of stuff out there about EVs is probably not going to get you very far, especially if they're worried about some other particular issues in their community. So have a look at the various things you want to highlight and see which ones are most relevant to your community at this point in time. And then when you communicate about it, you speak their language and you include local detail. So speaking their language means you understand your community, you understand the way people talk. If you come across as too didactic or too bureaucratic or too government-like or too marketing company-like, people aren't going to engage. So talk to your community the way everybody talks to each other. And include little local details because people love seeing stuff about their own community. When a lot of local newspapers folded around regional areas around the country a few years ago, what happened was the head media company had bought up all these little publications and they, to cut costs, took out all the local content. So they were just distributing generic content to all the newspapers and people stopped buying them. People like to see local content. And find your community's preferred style, and every community will be different. The example I can give is Corryong, about a similar size to Yakandanda, a little bit more remote, slightly older demographic, and yet they use Instagram. They have a Facebook community page as well, but a lot of the people in the town communicate with Instagram. In Yakandanda, I don't hear Instagram mentioned much at all. They mainly communicate through the Facebook community page and face-to-face as you walk down the street. So find out your community's preferred style. Email is very powerful for these types of groups. If there's somebody who is keen about what you're doing and they're a supporter, email updates are really powerful and they work well. You need to keep in mind print media. Maybe you've got a local newspaper that you can get some stuff in every now and then. And ultimately, I've got a typo there, but you really need to, as Anita said, not use one channel. And tell things in stories. Pretty much all of this comes back to for showing rather than telling, and also to engage people. You tell stories, tell interesting tidbits that people you know locally will find interesting, and add your own character or humor. You can absolutely have your own voice. So if you've got somebody in your group that's got, it can communicate reasonably well and has got a dry sense of humor, or just, you know, can write in that way that makes everybody else smile, get them to write some of the content. Maybe if you're worried about the language, get somebody else to edit it before it's posted. You don't have to get one person to do the lot. You can actually spread it around. And the other thing you can do is ask different community members, different committee members, say once every couple of months, every person has to submit a little, like couple of paragraphs on something in the community that's taken their attention, relevant to what you're trying to do. And that can be an effective way of getting bits of content, because it doesn't have to be comprehensive. It doesn't have to be really large. You just want tidbits, snack size bits of information to keep people engaged for those regular posts. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because I'm sure Anita will go through it with you, but in terms of digital communication, in 2021, when I did a little course on communicating with social media, back then, 45% to 47% of web traffic was on phones and also on PCs. So each of them. That's absolutely massive. So even though you might not feel comfortable with it, it's really, it will make a difference if you can get a handle on it, even just a little bit. Snackable content, I've already mentioned. Regular email newsletters to your supporters, social media updates to just general community and also supporters. And as Anita said, website, just a page somewhere, even if it's on somebody else's website, just a page which basically has your contact email, what you do, where you're located, and maybe bullet points of what projects you're working on, something like that. So people can look up and see that information always there. Or a Facebook profile is another way to do it. And then there's, you can plan your content, but I'm sure Anita will go through that with you. And with face-to-face events, make it fun. So use anything for novelty. One of the things that Jeff's suggesting is that for the CEEP program, they buy some little 2-element induction cooktops and give some to groups, and the groups loan them out to the community. And if you have an event, you could put one on a table at a market plugged into your EV, and you could be cooking soup or pancakes. That's what Try's done on the previous occasion. And of course, if you're going to do face-to-face, it helps to have a few props. So take advantage of the funding through the CEEP program and Jeff to get a couple of things for your group that you can use again and again and again. And yeah, different methods. I'm not going to go through this. I'm going to stop. Let's have some discussion and see what everybody thinks, and if you've got any questions.
I was inspired to think, between this discussion, your presentation, Juliette, and Anita, are people interested in a sort of little stakeholder mapping and next steps workshop where you work with your own group to just tease out who are the demographics we want to reach where would we find them? What relationships do we need to build? How, what do we actually have to do? Do we have the energy for it?
Maybe just explain what you mean by stakeholder mapping.
So we talked about parents, reaching parents via the school newsletter. Your stakeholder might be the person who puts together the school newsletter and finding out who that is, sort of thing. Council sustainability officers, because when Anita said, being on someone else's thread, the council reaches most of their community. So if they're putting nuggets in their newsletter, or if they're posting on socials, and you can come in and tag them with hey, we've got an event coming up at Wangaratta Council, sort of thing, it flows to more of their audience. So a little bit of mapping who you want to be building relationships with to amplify your own voice, I guess. That's who I would call your stakeholders.
Okay, now I'm conscious that we've eaten into Heather's time. So Heather, do you want to go for it? I'm just going to look at messages here too.
I'm going to, again, I'm like Juliette. I could go on forever. We could build a class around this sort of stuff. We could just book me for a meeting to come to your group for the people who want to know stuff, or across the network, do a dedicated webinar or something like that. So this is mainly a bit of a show, so that I can get feedback from you guys about what's going to be useful for us to try and deliver. So I'm going to look at GridView, which is an AusNet product, Piccolo, which is I'm going to say PowerCore product, and a few other things that I've been working on. All of us, if we register, can go to GridView and have a look at our local electricity data. So my offer is helping people understand what it all means if they start to get excited about that, if people are interested. When you go into GridView, you can zoom right down. These purple lines are 22 kilovolt lines around Wangaratta. This green substation is the zone substation in this particular part of the country that's bringing in the power from afar. The reason you've got 3s and 2s and 4s here is that there are 4 distribution substations, and I just haven't zoomed in enough. But here is a single distribution substation. And when I say distribution substation, that's the name for something that converts the 22 kilovolts down to the 415 volts. That's your overhead low voltage lines. And you click on one of those and you get all the data associated with that. When I click on this zone substation, you get all the information about how big it is, 37 MVA, that's a pretty big one. How much chance it will be, well, let me say that, it's 66 MVA, but in summer it can produce 37 and in winter it can produce 43, and I reckon this is how it's doing. So in winter, your winter loads dropped since 2020. Oh, they're forecasting a drop. They must be sharing the load with a new zone substation or something. And the summer, that's what the summer load has been doing there. So there's stories to tell about your electricity network. I think that's what I'm saying. And if you're interested, I'm here to tell stories about electricity networks. If I click and I came across to this distribution substation because that looked like a residential end of town, although I have walked along that creek and there's some funny industry up there, I think. A flour mill or something. Anyway, don't worry about me, maybe a water tower. This is residential, and you can click on this inside GridView and actually get the trace. I haven't got the dates on that, but that is 2.5 years worth of data for that distribution substation, and it shows you, what's been peaking and how that part of the section's been performing. So if you're excited about electricity data, so am I.
It's sexy.
Now, Power Core, and I'm happy if you're not in AusNet territory to sort of dig around in Power Core territory and see what they have. But I know they're not doing the GridView thing the way AusNet have decided to do it. But they have some data. But I've been talking to Power Core about this product, which is flexibility markets, and I am interested to explore whether there's an opportunity for community energy groups in interacting with flexibility markets. So if any of you guys are interested, I'm here to have a play with you. So when I go to this part, and I deliberately chose Shepparton here, 3 flexibility possibilities turned up. And when I clicked on that top one, it zoomed me into this part, which, is a tiny speck on that other map. And it told me they would be paying $2,000 a year for this constraint. And when I clicked into that constraint, I got this, which told me that the constraint is happening between 2 p.m. and 9 p.m. It's where did I think it was a summertime constraint? I don't actually know whether it's a summertime constraint. It is December to March, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they're forecasting forward. They want your solution in place by December 2029. And they are prepared to pay that $2,000 for 18 hours worth of utilisation across 6 events for up to 3 hours each. And they want 10.01. Yeah, 10 kilowatts.
10 kilowatts.
10 kilowatts, 30 kilowatt hours, right? 4 hours minimum runtime, 40 kilowatt hours. They want 40 kilowatt hours. You could get $2,000 a year. Now, Powercore are playing with this product at the moment. It's a new product. They don't quite know how their bidding will work. They don't know how to make it work. I'm sitting here going, interested to maybe play with their process a little bit and see if there's an interaction with community energy and the networks that we could play. So I was thinking of getting them to come and talk to us, but I talked to the woman at Powercore, and she could not understand what we did or why we might be interested. So I don't think they're ready for us. I said I'd come back to them in a year when they had a few more runs on the board. But just letting you all know about that. And
Heather, can you just, sorry to interrupt, but how many customers are in that case? How many?
You can actually see them, right? So I've looked at other ones down in Geelong where they're residential, right? And they've got hundreds of customers in this system. I imagine this is a distribution transformer. If you looked, and it's quite rural, and there's like 5 buildings there, 6 buildings there. These 3 have come outside, so I'm not sure if they're inside or outside the power delivery. And I don't know where Jubilee Road and Lemons Road are.
Yeah.
And I don't know if one of those is a pub, right, which is using all the power, or something like that, right? But Jeff?
Heather, it says a maximum yearly budget of $2,128. What's the minimum?
I think it's an option. So I think they're putting out these opportunities, and they're asking people to bid in solutions, and then they'll pay for the solution. And there's also been an argument about, well, why would we make a bid for 1 year's worth of funding when it's going to delay your upgrade for 10 years? Why don't you give me 10 years worth of funding, right? So they're working through some of those issues, but to be honest, Jeff, until I go through the process with them and educate them about community energy, I just don't know whether there's an opportunity for us or not.
So I'm very interested in unpacking this because I can envisage, just from what you've pitched, a engagement role for community energy groups.
Yeah, precisely. But they couldn't imagine that when I explained
it's crystal clear.
them.
Yeah. So, let's come back to this when you've got more visibility, and very interested in that conversation.
No, what I would say is you and I, let's have a meeting and let's trawl across your region and look at what the opportunities are looking like and work up what an approach might look like.
Happy to do that too.
And we're in Tatura, I know with Powercore, but we'd be willing to participate in that.
Yeah, you could hone in on Tatura now and see, is there anything around you?
Yeah, well, I don't know. It's not on. We're on the Powercore network.
Yeah, well, this is Powercore.
This is
I thought that was. Oh, right. Yeah, all right. Yeah.
No, this is Powercore. Good one.
Yeah, good one.
You got me on the edge of my seat, Heather.
Yeah.
something juicy and nerdy.
You woke me
up. And the third thing that I've often found myself doing for groups is this is Hayfield in Victoria, by the way. This is one of my microgrid projects, but how your electricity is delivered. And one of the analogies is, these red lines, the 66 kV, they're like a motorway. So from Hayfield, which is over here, they actually join the motorway in Maffra. So it's no good looking up at the 66 kV and saying, hey, it goes right past my community. I can build a big solar power system. You've got to understand where the on-ramp is, I guess. And Venus Bay, another one of my projects, is the same. They've got a wind farm right next door, but that wind energy goes off to the system and comes back via a long distance. So, these are a couple of graphs that or maps that I laid out for Hayfield as we tried to understand, well, you're on this feeder, but you've also got a supply from this side, and how would we build a microgrid? And when we look at consumption, what part of the region are we including inside our thinking and outside our thinking? And because electricity systems are already there and the constraints are on the electricity system, I'm happy to do some sort of skilling up work, because that's going to be how we think about optimizing solar and energy consumption and EVs and batteries and all that stuff. Getting the balancing right inside our communities is probably going to come from having a stronger understanding of what our community is when you draw an electricity boundary around it, rather than a community social boundary, if you like. And for Hayfield, I also tried to envisage it for them and explain to them how it worked in terms of electrical diagrams, but I don't know whether that worked at all. So that's those three sort of elements that I'd like feedback on. And then I've got a bunch more ideas. Maybe I'll just run through everything so that we can get to the end and then have a chat. So obviously Juliette's talked about providing a service and also using tools that automate your work. Obviously we have to do that. So maybe we do a bit more sharing and helping of how the best way to do things are, or how to make the work easier or more streamlined. I have an ambition to do a community energy academy. I started that last week with the NEM 101. How does the spot market work? But I'm looking at a whole lot of material there around upskilling us in terms of how we understand. I also run an Energy Nerds book club, which has been an interesting community that's obviously they're more aware of community energy now, and some community energy folk come to that, but I'm getting energy nerdy people come to that too. And I think that's been a good relationship to build. Obviously, I've touched on network savvy with those last three things. We're going to have a session on the solar sharer offer later this year. Try and find a keynote speaker for that. But I think that's really important. But also, I'm doing a lot of policy work. So to the extent that you guys want to keep track of solar for renters, and they're bringing in a new NatHERS home energy rating scheme and mandatory buys and some of that housing stuff. I might be able to sort of build up our capacity in that area. At the end of last week, we talked a lot about community advice and countering misinformation, and I've just been at Energy Networks Australia conference, and the same thing came up. And the energy network sector were told, you need a solid vision, because when you're not communicating what the future looks like, you're just leaving the ground open for all the misinformation to bubble up. And there was someone promoted their work on pre-bunking. I will go and look at the references and put something in our next newsletter. So there's a whole lot of stuff there that we've got quite a lot of material starting to build up in the ecosystem, especially around climate communications. And yeah, so a bit more, and we should do our own vision, right? Like, the more we articulate detail about what we think the energy future looks like, and how to put the narrative around uncertainty without just saying, but the floor's wide open, bring on nuclear sort of thing. I think that's really important. And of course, I'm interested in where we go with community energy expertise stuff. So that's part of what we're doing with the comms as a starting point. In New South Wales, we've just applied for a grant, so keep your fingers crossed for us, because that will flow to a bunch of masterclasses and stuff like that. And in that grant, we want congresses, we want funding for congresses, and we would run masterclasses with congresses. We want to develop learning networks. So, if the comms people all in each group know each other and know where to go for help and know where to go for advice from each other, that just creates a much I'm not alone type feeling in working in this space. The New South Wales government has tried to say, well, you all need professional indemnity and you shouldn't be giving advice unless you've got professional indemnity. So I think finding the space for community folk to act in a fairly skilled way without all needing to go off and get an engineering degree and certification, I think is quite important. And I spoke to Essential Energy, who are doing this week at the Energy Networks conference. They're doing skills and training in the regions, right? So they've seen that so much is happening across the regions. If they can support new electricians, new trades that are all about energy futures, and they're going to be rolling out face-to-face workshops in different parts of their region. And I said to them, we need some free stuff, because the free level is still really relevant. And some of those guys will go on to get your certifications, but we've all got an interest in the community being well informed about the energy future. So that's my did I say ambition here? Just look at that. I can't promise anything. And finally, your turn. There you go. Thoughts, anyone?
So when you say ideas, what's the prompting question? Ideas about?
What would you like us to spend our skilling up effort doing for you?
Maybe I'll prompt a little bit of thought here in saying that one of the things Heather and I realised was that not all of your groups have mailing lists and automated collection of emails. and we've talked about how we could set up a shared resource for groups where basically there's a single landing page. Anybody can go to it, they put their name in, their email in, and they choose which group they want to get updates from. And then the designated group can log in and send messages from that account to everybody on their mailing list. So it streamlines it. You don't have to set up the account. All you need is just a little bit of guidance on how to get in, and we could potentially provide some templates as well, so that you just have to chuck your content in, and all the formatting and maybe a logo and a banner, it's already there. So that gives you an idea. Can you think of something else along those lines that might prove useful for yourself or your groups?
Juliette, what you just said, I think is relevant to any community that is wanting to develop a group like we are. I think those of us who are already set up have some of these, but they're really big barriers if there's only one or two of you in a community. And that's what we've got to support.
And the literacy, I think, but the other reason that we're thinking about this is that the literacy of your group members varies enormously. And you've also got the issue with when a group member leaves and they happen to be the one who's been good at all the comms, what do the rest of you do? So this provides some continuity of a service that you can use, and that most people, I'm not saying everybody, because there's always somebody in the group who's completely tech averse, but that most people in the group would be able to use without too much trouble at all. And your mailing list is in there. It's not stuck on somebody's PC where their hard drive has carked it. So it's accessible and it stays there. It's permanent.
Training energy ambassadors in every community.
Yep.
Building on what you were just saying.
Wasn't one of the groups over in Jeff's area doing that, Jeff? They were doing some sort of training of energy ambassadors?
Is that the Bright Sparks?
Yeah, that's the one I'm thinking of.
Yes, is the answer. Over in the Loddon Mallee.
Yeah.
They're doing that. And
there's a bit of a difference.
The challenge they're facing is one, recruiting, but also then once people are skilled, to use those skills. They're two big steps.
Yeah.
And I'm sure if you did a straw poll around the room about other programs where groups have upskilled, the difficulty in deploying that knowledge to be implemented across their locality is very difficult to do with a voluntary network.
And
unpacking that is probably worth having a good look in understanding why that would be so.
I saw a model in the Northern Rivers region of New South Wales. It was about community resilience rather than community energy. But I got invited in by the back end of the model, right? So all these people in the wake of the floods had been invited to sort of community leadership program on community resilience, and they'd been given free tickets. But to get your free ticket to the coaching and the workshop, and it was a very well thought through workshop by someone who really knew what they were doing with this work. To get your free ticket, you had to promise that you would then go away from that course and deliver something in your community. And they had a whole sort of WhatsApp group as they all shared for the next 12 months what they were delivering in that community. And EARN, which is the Evans Area Resilience Network, was formed out of that initial workshop. So I think I think, yeah, really thoughtful ways of delivering that is worthwhile doing and doing well, because then you get the enduring impact rather than here's a training course.
Yeah, that sounds good, because you're creating a community of practice. They can support each other, and they'll exchange ideas, etc., and experiences. And it's committing them to something when they sign up. So they have to make space for it.
Yeah, and also that's arising out of an emergency as well. So you've got a different set of circumstances there, which, you know, drive people to do that sort of thing. We've probably got a bit of an opportunity here now in our current fuel shortage, you know, and where this in forgetting the war and all the politics about all that. But certainly there's an opportunity for the whole renewable energy industry to take advantage of this, to take a fairly large step forward, particularly also in the light that would appear that energy costs are going to come down later on this year by 10%. So it really is an opportunity here for us to step in all fields, you know, whether it be electric cars or whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm.
How we do that is an interesting conundrum.
Terry, it's quite an interesting conversation in the UK at the moment on exactly the sort of things you're talking about. And I think it's the little opportunities, and it could be like our induction cooktops as a starter. But any of these things now being in the UK, put as you save us buying one drop of oil, you help build energy security.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Us, energy together, the SEN, we're sort of at the start, but it helps to have ambition of where we're trying to get to.
Yeah, and I'll just say one more thing, Juliette. If you go back, you know, 15 years ago, 20 years ago when I put solar on, it was an argument, a cost argument. It was quite simple. Now, when what you're talking about, Heather, you know, this is a complex area. It is extraordinarily complex.
Mm-hmm.
And for someone to come on and say, oh, yeah, well, I'll volunteer, I'll get some training. The way this industry is trained, you could be trained yesterday and it's out of date today. You know what I mean? It's a daunting thing because people don't want to actually get up and say something that's not right anymore. So and some of it won't change, but yeah, it's bloody complicated.